friend from Maryland. And I'm not trying to be snarky. You were talking about codification. I obviously am not advocating for this, but why didn't the majority just codify Roe or codified Casey? Like, why wasn't there just a movement to codify those opinions?
Well, you don't codify an opinion. You have to derive the principles that are embodied in law. And I understand that's what this is. And to the extent it's not, I'd be interested to have that conversation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm not advocating for that, but I think one of the big problems is the way viability is described.
You're not advocating for it?
We're not talking over
no.
each other.
Okay.
The gentleman has the floor. If you want to yield or ask a question of one of your colleagues on the dais, please ask me, and I will yield to them.
Okay, I would
Respectfully.
Well, I have a legitimate question for my friend from Maryland. I think we're actually having a decent conversation. You know, we're both lawyers. I'm not the constitutional expert that he is. I mean, this is a legit question that I have. And I know you don't just codify an opinion, but you get what I'm saying. I just think that one of the problems is viability, because as you were talking about the legal precedent, I mean, viability goes back to common law, right? And so you would see a shifting in the law and the statute going back from viability, and as viability shortened, you had more and more restrictions. And again, this is hypothetical, but typically that's where we were. So that's just a question, because I think viability is a big hang up here. So I'd yield back to you.
Well, I appreciate it. I think you put your finger on, I think, what's most agonizing about this debate for most Americans. I mean, nobody, to my knowledge, is out celebrating abortion. And the reason that we've treated it, I think, properly within the constitutional law as a personal decision is because all those things are so difficult. But Justice O'Connor's opinion was saying this is a scientific or medical question of viability. That's where we're going to draw the line. And if it moves up, so be it. It moves up. I personally favor a massive investment in research into birth control, so nobody ever has to face this choice. But I do think that there are some people who oppose abortion who also oppose, for example, the morning after pill, because they consider that an abortifacient. And I don't know if that's covered under the Texas law or not, but certainly if we eviscerate Roe versus Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey, it would be. And if you'll permit me one more sec, if you go back and you look at Griswold and Roe, one of the things that the justices talk about is any government that could prevent you from making these private decisions could also compel you. So in other words, if we could stop you from having an abortion, we could compel you to have an abortion, or we could compel you to be sterilized. And we know we have a shameful history in our country of sterilization of especially non-white populations and Native Americans and so on. So we got to be real careful before we start just trashing the right to privacy. Thank you, Mr. Reschenthaler.
No, I thank my colleague. I truly, genuinely, enjoyed going back and forth. I appreciate the candor. So just getting back to questioning. So we were talking about where the American people are on this issue, and I just want to cite an actual poll. So the Associated Press did a poll, and it's timely, June of this year. According to the public polling, 65% of Americans say abortion should be illegal in the second trimester. Additionally, 80% of Americans say that abortion should be illegal when in the third trimester. So I think a lot of the polls that are being cited are polls that are asking in regard to the first trimester. Obviously, the American people draw a big distinction between abortion in the different trimesters. I know we've already talked ad nauseum about viability issues and how it's defined, but Ranking Member McMorris Rodgers, would you like to add anything
Sure.
to the discussion?
Sure. Well, I understand in Roe, the Supreme Court was talking about viability at 28 weeks. When you look at the states and their definition of viability as they are writing at state laws, it differs a lot. It differs from state to state. And, some define it at different weeks, some say 28 weeks, but there's different definitions. One of the things about this bill that I think it feels so extreme is that the definition of viability is just left up to the provider. And that I think is just opens the door for interpretation, personal interpretation, and we all know that a baby is pretty dependent, pretty needy, even upon birth.
Could I respond? I just want to make this point. One of the things that we're seeing in many states now around the country are laws that would prolong when a woman could actually get or a girl could actually get an abortion, and all kinds of having to get legal permission to do that. And so what we're finding is a pushing further into pregnancy of the availability of abortions. I think that is certainly intentional and hoping to get to the point where it might be illegal, might be in a point of viability. And that's why it is so important, I think, to have this national legislation that would make very clear what is allowable.
Ranking member, anything in response?
When the U.S. Supreme Court made their decision in Roe v. Wade, they left it up to the states. And I really believe that, even if Roe v. Wade was overturned in some scenario, it would still be up to the states to determine what the law is going to be. And that's where this is the Congress, this is the House of Representatives overriding, establishing a national state law that would mandate, that would overturn state laws for ultrasounds, for parent notification. I mean, we are talking pretty extreme legislation here at the national level to overturn what the states have put into place.
Thank you, Ranking Member McMorris Rodgers, with that. Thank you, Chairwoman. I'll yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I will now recognize Mr. Morale.